Hello and welcome to those endless mysteries. Today I have a Bigfoot encounter from 2004. In this encounter we have three witnesses of this event. The first story of this event comes from Chris. Chris says that it was a Saturday morning on the third week of June that him and his friends met up to go on a week-long fishing and camping trip. Tim and Steve got to his house around 9 a.m. with all their gear that morning. As they loaded up the camper, they all three were ready and needed a break from all the pressures of life. Chris says they were really looking forward to just sitting around and doing some fishing, with them getting to their camping site around 6 p.m. that evening, with about an hour to hour and a half to set up their camp, saying that the first 4 days went great, with the three of them catching fish and having a great time, Chris said, with the fifth day getting off to a great start as well. That is until around 7 p.m. that evening, when Chris says that they started hearing strange animal calls, saying that all three of them at this time was trying to figure out what was making these calls. Was it coyotes, wolves, or something else? The sounds were loud and strange. Chris says that he had never heard anything like it before, saying that the calls lasted a good 15 to 20 minutes, with the calls just ending as quickly as they had started. So after about an hour, he says that it just faded to the back of his mind, when all of a sudden a stick came flying into camp, with it hitting right in front of their fire. Chris says that all three of them jumped up out of their chairs. Then he said he heard a loud growling coming from the left of where they were sitting. At this time, Chris says that he looked at his friends in disbelief, with both of them giving the strange look back to him. He says at this time he heard another growl off to his left again, saying that they all turned towards the sound of the growl. Within just a second or two, another piece of wood came crashing into camp, landing only a few feet from their fire once again. Was this creature trying to help them by throwing more firewood near their fire? Or was the creature trying to scare them and make them leave? As I asked Chris this question, Chris replied, "Now thinking back, I'm not for sure. The wood was hitting only a few feet from our fire, but it scared the shit out of all of us. So thinking back, this thing could have been making some kind of gesture. Maybe it was just trying to give us a gift now thinking. But at the time I was truly scared by the growls and wood flying into our camp." Now Chris says that after a few seconds another growl sung out just to their right now. As they turned back to their right, Tim shouted out, "There it is." Then as Chris's sight caught up with Tim's, he says he saw a very large animal standing about 20 to 25 feet away from him. It was dark in color and was giving off a green eye shine, he said. Then he noticed that this creature was standing on two legs, with it looking as if it was standing about 8 foot tall as well, while it also had the broadest shoulders he had ever seen, saying that he knew right away that it wasn't a human. It was just way too wide to be a person. Then Chris said that he had met some very tall people in his life, such as Andre the Giant among others, but this creature had about a foot on each of them. Knowing it wasn't a person at this time, he says that he started to panic somewhat, that he screamed out, "Do you see that? It's huge," he said to the others. At this time, Chris says he started heading towards the camper, with Tim and Steve bringing up the rear, with all three of them rushing into the camper, saying that they could hear something moving outside of the camper, with growls and very loud calls coming from outside, taking about an hour to move off, Chris thinks. Later they all heard strange calls coming from further away. Then as they felt safe enough to come out of the camper, as they walked back out and looked around the camp, they noticed a few more pieces of wood around camp. Then once again a strange call ringed out in the distance, with all three of them deciding to pack up camp, which took about an hour, and then they headed back home. While Chris remembers them all three talking a lot about what had happened to them at first, but by the time they got home, no one was talking and it was as if they were just burnt out. So that was a great sighting story. But what about Tim? How did he see all the events they witnessed that night? Tim said that this trip started out great. The fishing was great and the relaxing was going well, at least for the first 4 days anyway, with the first part of the fifth day going well. But that later that evening some strange calls started. At first they sounded way off in a distance. Tim said he wasn't for sure just how long the calls lasted, but that he thought they had went on for a good while. Then they just stopped, with them sitting around the camp for a while after building their nightly fire, saying that they all three was talking about just how great the trip was going. Then Tim said that they were relaxing around the fire when all of a sudden a heavy piece of wood came flying into camp, with it hitting only a few feet from their fire. That it was right in front of them. He said that he was stunned when the piece of wood came flying into camp, that he realized that Chris and Steve had turned towards the left of the camp. Then as he was turning to the left to join them, this is when he said he heard the growl, stating that this again startled him as well. Then he says that another piece of wood came flying back into camp, followed by another growl towards his right. As his head turned, he says he saw a very large man or animal just standing there, that if it was a man, then it was the biggest man he had ever seen. He's sure that the figure that he saw that night was 7.5 to 8.5 foot tall, possibly even up to 9 foot tall, his three stated. It was big, very big. I've never seen anything like it. It was very dark in color from head to toe, with what looked like stringy hair hanging off its arms. The hair wasn't even to Tim. That's why he said it looked stringy to him, with its arms being very large. Tim said that the creature's arms were bigger than his own legs. Being 6 foot tall, Tim said that he felt very small standing in front of what he was looking at. Then Tim said that he saw Chris take off running towards the camper, with him following very close behind, saying that once they jumped into the camper and locked the doors, that he heard this thing moving in their campsite. He wasn't for sure just how long it stayed around the campsite, but while being scared, it felt like a very long time. After a good while, Tim said that he could hear more calls coming from this creature, but it sounded as if this thing had moved off from their campsite. Then he said they all three decided to go back outside of the camper. He says at this time they seen more wood around camp. Then all three of them decided to leave and started breaking down their campsite. So that was Tim's version of what happened with this encounter. So now what about Steve? What did he see and notice during his encounter? Steve also said that this trip had started off great, that the fishing was great, while the weather was being very nice as well, with only one rain shower late in the morning hours. Then came the fifth evening of the trip, he says, saying that they had just started getting ready to start the evening fire and meals, when they started hearing some strange calls coming from a distance away. At the time, he said he was thinking it was a pack of coyotes, that it didn't really hit him that it could have been something else, saying that they had just finished eating and was sitting around the fire when all of a sudden a piece of wood came flying into camp, while to his left he heard a loud growl. He says he turned quickly towards the sound, thinking at first it might be a bear. Then he said another large piece of wood came into camp, landing just a few feet from them, right in front of the fire, he stated. Then again a loud growl just off to the right of him. As he turned towards the growl, he says he saw something standing around 25 feet in front of him. This is when he said that he knew it wasn't a bear, but what has become known as a Sasquatch or Bigfoot type creature, saying that because of the time of the day, the figure looked to be very dark in color, a black or very dark brown. He says he could see the hair hanging off of its creature's arms and legs, going by its eye shine. Steve says he thinks this creature stood at least 8, maybe 8.5 feet tall, with very large and broad shoulders, maybe 3.5 to 4 feet across, while looking very thick throughout its chest area. As he noticed Chris and Tim moving towards the camper, he took one look back at this thing as he was starting to head towards the camper as well. This is when Steve says he saw just how thick it was, saying that this creature was almost as thick as it was broad. Steve once again said that this thing was a very large creature, a big one for sure. He never believed in these things before, but he says he does now. So wow, I believe these three young men saw something that day. But was it a Bigfoot type creature, or was it something else? I can only tell their stories here. I didn't see it for myself, so I can't truly say it was a Bigfoot. But I do believe they saw something out there that day. So a Bigfoot, maybe. Something paranormal, for sure. This sighting was from Upper Washington in 2004. So I hope you all have enjoyed this sighting encounter. And don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Also hit that notification button as well so you can keep up with all of our latest videos. And until next time, have a great day.